Welcome to Char, Tito Puente Jr. Thank you so much for joining Nelson Marquez and I.
Yes.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here, guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you, man.
Mucho gusto.
Igualmente.
Eso.
Tito, I've been a major fan of your father's and a major fan of you for many years now. I remember as a kid, my titi bringing me to see La Gran Cambo in Los Angeles at the Palladium as a teenager, man. I think she had to watch me, so she was like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to take you." And we had danced salsa. We had a great time. And then several years later, actually, through a common friend, I got an opportunity to meet you and see you in concert in Las Vegas. I just felt like it was almost like a spiritual experience because it was almost like I felt like Tito was there, like with us. It was, you've heard of Beatlemania. Some people have called it Tito Puentes mania, but it was, for me, it was more because it was like there was, maybe it's in the genetics and just everything there was just the energy in the air. So how did that transpire for you? Share with us kind of like how that has come to be.
Thank you for having such great memories of me performing live. And of course, my late father is to, be commended for that, simply because he instilled in me the humbleness and the experience of performing live, just as an entertainer, all around entertainer. So and that's why I exude that from when I'm performing the music of a Rey Timbal, Tito Puente. And if any of you or anybody watching right now have met Tito Puente, they would know that my father's very humble, down-to-earth cat. Being, the Latin ambassador superstar around the world, he was very down-to-earth. So if you were to meet him in the streets of New York, he'd be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Very, very down to earth. So I get all that experience from him. But it was an amazing life, just being around him, an icon, a legend, child prodigy as well. Record holder for probably the most Latin albums ever created by one performer. I think he tops at 186 albums to his credit. That's far, far, far exceeds more than any other Latin artist, I think, alive today, simply because of his lifespan, and his career was over 50 years. But it was amazing. It was an amazing experience being around the king of Latin music and, just traveling around the planet with him. It's been 21 years this year since his passing in May 31st of 2000, but we remember him, and I continue pushing his music to the new stratospheres and the new generation. Because remember, a lot of kids today who were not even born then are now 20 years old today, never got to experience and see Tito Puente live. And if you got to experience and see Tito Puente or Celia Cruz en vivo and see them live, then you are very rare, one of those rare people that experience something, like you said, a religious experience. Experiencia religiosa.
My mom and dad had met Tito when they were starting early in their career. So there's been a long love within our family and within our circle of friends for Tito Puentes and for your music. I'd love to talk to you about, how have you been handling this whole COVID thing and dealing with that? And I saw that there was a very limited list of concerts. Has all your shows been canceled, or how's that been working for you?
I got some wood here, so I'm going to knock on it, that nothing that I had set up for the concert tour of last year in 2020 was canceled. Everything was postponed. So thank God for that, because I know a lot of musicians. Nelson can probably chime in on this too as well. As musicians, we like to, of course, perform, and that's where we get our bread and butter, basically. So it was very, very difficult during the last year for all musicians, including my orchestra and every musician I spoke with. And that includes the bigger musicians too, and the bigger celebrities and the bigger stars, and they all went through it the same way, because, as artists, we want to just share our artwork with everybody. And I built a career on that. Same with my father. I'm so glad my dad wasn't here to see this happen. But what would he have done? He probably would have pushed forward in recording, and that's exactly what I did. And I recorded a full-length LP during the pandemic. It was very, very tricky and hard to do, but I reached out to everybody because I knew that all the artists were sitting at home, and I said, let me go hit them up now so they're not on the road. And I caught each and every one of them. I got 10 beautiful acts and artists on that recorded with my father throughout the decades of his career to do a beautiful tribute record to Tito Puente. I haven't recorded in 11 years. So this was something that was coming to fruition prior to the pandemic. In 2019, we were discussing this and trying to get it all together. Then the pandemic hit, and I said, I can't stop doing this because I want to do what my father would have done. And he would have kept moving forward and pushing forward to get the completion, to see the completion of it, which he did with his last record, which was in 2000, which was called Obra Maestra with Eddie Palmieri. And my father knew he was very sick at the time, but he wanted to see the album to its completion, and he did. So I thought the same way. And I'm glad we finally got it out there and it's completed. And it was tricky to do. Remember, I had to fly everybody. Well, everybody had to do it remotely. But Tony Vega, God, man, he's an incredible singer, performer. Not only did he have he caught coronavirus, but he also had open heart surgery. And he was dying to sing on this tribute record so badly, no pun intended, that he flew down from Alabama and recorded at a studio here in South Florida. And, you know, he had the mask and everything, but he belted it out. I also went up to Orlando, worked with Meñique, you know, talented people that were much older, you know, they're elderly. I would even put them in that category. But I'm glad that I got to record them throughout the pandemic because they loved the fact that we were doing a tribute to Tito Puente. And I think that's what really mattered the most. And it kept the band working as well.
So that's fascinating. So what can you share with us about the process of how you conceptualize this album? What were the songs? Can you share with us a little bit about what songs you chose and how some of those arrangements came together?
Yeah, the name of the album is called The King and I. So the concept of the record was El Rey y Yo, and I wanted to do something that would be reflective of Tito Puente's career in different decades, starting from the 1950s all the way to his passing in 2000. So that's many, many decades of music. I wanted to take one artist that recorded specifically in a studio setting with Tito Puente. Meñique recorded back 50 years ago in 1971 with a tune called Niña y Señora. He's 87 years old now, but I got him on the album. So I took some Meñique for the 1970s. Then in the 80s, I got Jose Alberto Canario. 1990s, I got Domingo Quiñones, Tony Vega, who recorded 30 years ago on the 100th album of Tito Puente, Número 100, with a tune called Déjame Soñar. I remade a lot of the songs from those decades into this album. Notwithstanding, I also had to add female singers too as well. So I had Yolanda Duque, who recorded with Tito Puente and toured with the Tito Puente Orchestra for over 10 years in the 1990s. And then, of course, the queen of percussion, Sheila E. I had to get her on the record too. And she, of course, recorded with my father as well, along with her dad, Pete Escovedo, in a tribute with a tune called El Rey de Timbal. Each artist, the concept was to get them, and then not only did I record them in the studio or remotely, they also did some testimony in talking about how they recorded their session with Tito Puente, and then of course the session with Tito Puente Jr. So this is all being done also for a documentary series that's going to come out on life story of El Rey de Timbal later on this year, produced by Mr. Edward James Olmos. So I'm really excited about that, and I got everybody's video. The video, I compiled it with all the artists, and that'll be out, I think, right in the beginning of August, because they're still like editing it. And it's real exciting that I got this record to come out. And that's the concept of the record. I got to thank my wife, Rosalie. She came up with a lot of the ideas of the song titles. And remember, my father had over 10,000 compositions. So we have a vault up in New York that my mom controls, and I went over there and she said, go in there and cherry pick tunes. It was very difficult to pick songs that people can really relate to, especially mambo dancers, because there were so many. You know, the catalog is so large. So I can actually do volume 2 or 3 and 4 of this album. And I think I'm going to do that because the songs were so good. And I got so many fans requesting, hey, can you record this song and this song and that song? So I really want to please the fans and the dancers with the music of my father. Remember, there's so much music there. But with this record, The King and I, the concept of the record was being in the studio with the king of Latin music and myself, each artist giving their own testimony on how they relate to Tito Puente. Really cool concept, and I'm glad it's out.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is great. I saw Nelson sharing something. Nelson, what was that you were sharing?
Oh, this is a reel-to-reel of Tito. I don't know if you remember this album cover. My grandmother shared this with me and had it in her collection. I don't know if you can see the cover, but it's an early Tito Puente. Are you familiar with this, Tito?
Nelson, that I cannot believe that you have. That is rare, what you have right there.
Wow.
You got it on reel-to-reel, which is a quarter-inch reel, I believe.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Let me tell you, I don't even think I have that. And I got to find out my mother has it, but that is a classic RCA Victor. So back in the 1950s, people had the reel-to-reels and a Vitrola. Right. ¿Me entiende? Un
Yes.
vitro for the
Seguro.
LP. And
Sí.
that right there is a rare tape that you have there. It probably sounds really like scratchy, but that's something that's very rare and it's very valuable too. Nice to see that you have that, and your abuela has good taste in music.
Absolutely, man. I mean, man, Tito pushed the music so much forward. I mean, seeing old footage of him and Celia together and just, I mean, it's part of the legend of the culture, man. So it's hats off.
Yeah, cool legacy. Great tape that you got there. I have so many albums of Dad. And back then they used to do like 180-gram vinyl, which was, you could smash it over somebody's head and it'll break,
Right. Yeah.
Un plato.
Yes.
So they're very heavy too. My mom has a whole storage facility full of that stuff, and it's nice. That's good for collectors. But let me say, that's a very valuable one that you have there. So kudos to your grandma.
Kudos. I can't wait to play it. I'm getting some of my reel-to-reel tape recorders fixed so I can hear it actually.
Yeah, vinyl is like the new kick now, and so are those half-inch reels and the quarter-inch reels like that. RCA remastered a lot of those things, but you got the original, and that's classic.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Glad to share it with you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. It's awesome. I remember as a kid listening to Numero 100 with my aunt and with my mom and just loving that album. So that's great to hear you talking about it. And that's really exciting what you mentioned about the documentary. Can you share with us a little more about what's happening with that?
Yeah.
If you know where it's going to be coming out so people can look for it.
So last year, well, let me start off by saying that Edward James Olmos is one of the executive producers of the docu-series. He is not only a fan of Tito Puente, but a very good friend. And he spoke at my father's eulogy at his passing. And we've known Edward for many, many years. A fantastic Academy Award-winning actor. He's just amazing, and we love him. And he wanted to do something special on the 20th anniversary of my father's passing, which was last year. Thus, pandemic hit, and we had to put everything up kind of on hold. It was very, very hard for me to get to New York to get 8mm footage tape and a lot of those reel-to-reel tapes of old classic Tito Puente performances. And what you're going to see in the docu-series is Tito Puente, the man, the myth, the legend. How my father, what inspired him to become the child prodigy, growing up in Spanish Harlem. We want to get that story of Tito Puente and his humble beginnings. And I really wanted to go in deep into his roots on his Puerto Rican heritage, my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncles from San Germán, Puerto Rico. We're going to add all that into the docu-series. We couldn't just do a documentary because Tito Puente's career is so vast and 50 years. So we said, let's go with a docu-series, 8-part docu-series. We're not sure which platform it's going to come out on, whether it be Netflix or Hulu or what have you, but we are working on it. But what I did find and uncover and unearthed was fantastic footage. So thank you to my mother, Margie Puente, who documented Tito Puente for 20 some odd years at the end of his career, at the end of his life, actually. And we got a lot of footage of us at home and Christmas time, Thanksgiving, Dad just fooling around with the kids, with the grandkids. You're going to see that. I think that's what the fans want to see. They want to see that Tito Puente humanitarian side, who he was just as a humble person and just speaking in normal terms, and having dinner with the family and stuff like that. You're going to see Tito Puente, the father. And that's what I want people to see, because everybody can throw on YouTube and see Tito Puente performing with the timbales and the solos and all that. But now you're going to see Tito Puente at his humble self on a couch talking at Christmas time, opening up a gift, being a comedian. And I think that's what the fans want to see, that side of him. Not only that, we would also want to put into an effect after the docuseries as somewhat of a documentary movie, like a biopic. So we want to do a whole movie on Tito Puente's life story, again, which would be very difficult to do in 90 minutes or 2 hours of time, simply because of his vast career. But the documentary will be the definitive documentary series of Tito Puente, his life story. The trailer should be out by this fall. We had to put a little delay on it simply because of the pandemic, but it is coming together. I got some fantastic footage. You can see a little bit of it on the new single that I've just recently released called 20 años, 20 years. It's on YouTube, and we put a little clip of Tito Puente speaking at the recording session with Eddie Palmieri in 2000, right before his passing. So it's almost like he's speaking from degree, I guess. But it's really cool footage we got. And I got stuff from when he was young. It's very hard to get footage from when Tito Puente was a child, because in 1920s and 30s, there were no video cameras, only just photos. But we do have testimony from different artists. Sheila E., we're going to Carlos Santana, Ruben Blades, all the great, great icons of Latin music want to participate in this docuseries. And we hope that all of them can. That's why we had to do an 8-part docuseries to get them all in there. But everybody loved Tito Puente, and I hopefully that this will be out this winter, more or less December this year.
Awesome. That's exciting. One of the things you mentioned is, in the concept of the album about the different phases of Tito Puente's career. And then you also mentioned the documentary that covers the different phases of his life. You as his son, but also as an artist, can you share a little bit about your growth from, being a child and a kid, experiencing, your father as, as a dad, but also as an icon. And then what was your path in terms of relating to your dad? So what were some of the different phases that you went through childhood, teenage, and becoming a man, and then becoming a father? And how did those different stages of your life relate to your relationship with your father?
Well, I guess now would be the time to say that I'm going to do a book on all that. And I got some really crazy history just traveling around the planet with, an icon like Tito Puente was just, I can write just a book on that alone. But with my path, I originally liked, when I was growing up, I'll start from high school. When I was growing up, I liked rock music. I started off playing drums. That's my first love as a drummer. Phil Collins, Chester Thompson, Neil Peart, all the greats, the great rock drummers. So I was into that bag. My father didn't really care for rock drumming. He was into more jazz, Gene Krupa, all those great drummers, from yesteryear. So he was into that bag, but I was into heavy metal and just straight rock music. Iron Maiden, Metallica, Slayer. Those were my favorite bands. They still are today. And then I traveled with Tito Puente. What happened was that my father did 300 shows a year. And during the summertime, during high school, my mother said, "You're not spending enough time with your father," because he was never really there that much. And I said, the best way we can do it is during the summertime, go on the road with him. And that was the most incredible experience that I can, explain to you guys. Again, I'll put the definitive version in the book, but just experiencing on the road with a legend like that and understanding that different cultures all have one thing in common, and that's music. And when I would travel to the Far East and to the Orient, especially in the Orient, in Indonesia and in China and Japan, just those countries, they didn't even know to understand the language, but they understood the language of the conga, the timbal, the bongo of Tito Puente. And that took me into the 3-2 clave and learning about Latin music and my first love of it. And that's when I started playing timbal, conga, bongo, and those instruments from the derivative of the drums. I still love rock music, but at that point I started getting into more Latin dance and Latin house music. And of course I had my own career doing dance music and freestyle and house. And I did 10 years of that, dancing around on stage, traveling the world with my dancers and my crew and all that. But it all comes back to the roots of it all, which is Tito Puente music, in which I play now. Just the ups and downs of being in the music industry. Nelson can probably, understand this very well, that it varies. One thing's for sure is that music brings everybody together. It brings nations and cultures and creeds and colors, everybody together. And I see that through my audiences every time I travel around the planet. Everybody comes to see the music and hear the music of Herré Timbal. As if you think about it, the music that I am playing is over almost 60, 70 years old. He was creating these songs back in 1949. So it still resonates with younger fans, and it's great to just keep that in perpetuity. Keep it going. Throughout my kids too. Hopefully my kids will take after me, my little son and my daughter, and they're musicians in their own right, and hopefully they'll keep the tradition alive. Yeah.
Nice. So when you were going through your drumming heavy metal stage, did that cause a conflict between you and your dad? How did you guys navigate that? Was that challenging?
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you the short story. I had a band called Monoxide. It's a death metal band. And I loved it. And I still love my guys. I keep in touch with them. They actually play with professional heavy metal bands now. They go to Europe a lot. I went towards the mambo music. One time I can tell you a quick story. Yeah, we were a garage band. That's what they called it back in the 80s. So when we were rehearsing one day and my dad came down and said, we're doing this heavy metal stuff, screaming and yelling in the mic. And he comes in his robe. I guess we must have woke him up. It was like 3 PM or something. And he goes, hey. And he looked at me, he goes, you're off beat. I said, how would you know? You don't even like this music. He goes, yeah, but I know timing. And I was doing like thrash metal. But it was a great experience. And I'm glad because I got my feet wet and I learned about performing live, not with Latin music or Latin jazz music, but with heavy metal. I mean, the guys in front of us were moshing and stage diving, but still I got the courage to play live. And I was a very young age at 15 years old, 15, 16. And that was really, an experience for me to get my feet wet in the music industry in general. Of course, traveling with Tito Puente, he was doing stadiums and I was doing, about maybe 50 people coming to my concerts. I would have to sell tickets to get people to come to my show. But my father was selling out stadiums around the planet. And that was really the experience where I felt like he was teaching me about the industry itself and how, cutthroat it could be and just the discipline of getting on flights and getting on airplanes and moving from city to city and performing and bringing music to the fans and people and understanding how record sales work. And he really honed in on that with me, and I'm glad he did that. He didn't teach me how to play drums. A lot of people get that misconception. Tito Puente was very busy. My father didn't really have time to be sitting down and teaching people rudiments and stuff like that. He said, just listen and watch and just mimic and try to follow my lead. And I'm glad I did that. But he made me go to school to read and write music. I went to Five Towns College in New York City, actually in Long Island, New York. And I'm grateful for that because he pushed me to do that. And so did my mother. So kudos to both my parents for making sure that I learned how to read and write music because it was too easy to be the son of Tito Puente and get out there and perform. I'm glad that I took the route that I did, which was learning how to read and write music. And now I can instill that in my children.
When you were home with your father, did you pick up on his work ethic, his practice routines, and how do they affect your practice today, the way you keep your chops up when you're going to go out on the road?
Every part of what you just said is factual. I got all my discipline from Tito Puente. He was I would go as far as saying militant with his orchestra. He made sure that these guys knew that he got the best professional readers, and professional musicians in the Tito Puente orchestra throughout his entire career. He was very, very, just very disciplined in his musicianship. And he wanted to make sure that the band was tight. And of course, he had the master congueros with him, Giovanni Hidalgo, Patato Valdez, Mongo Santa Maria, Willie Bobo. These are Ray Barretto. These are master percussion players.
Absolutely.
And my father taught me this, Nelson. He said, surround yourself with creative people, thus you will be creative. So my dad was around creative guys like that were master musicians. He had to keep up with them, even though he was the eldersman, but he had to keep up with them because these guys didn't F around. They came in there and they played their asses off, and Dad had to keep up with them. But then in return too, there are percussion players that needed to keep up with Tito Puente as well, especially the musicians that he worked with. You mentioned something about being at home. Yes, I did get the work ethic from him, but I could tell you one thing. As a child, all of us can probably vouch for this. Your parents tell you not to do something. What do? You do it. So there were a lot of drums in my garage. So my dad would say, this is when I was 8 or 9 years old, no toca mi timbales, no touch my drums, don't touch my things, nothing. What do I do as a kid? Go in the drum. I start banging on the drums. And that's where I got the incentive to play music. But remember, as an 80s kid, growing up in the 80s, I was into Michael Jackson, Phil Collins, Def Leppard, all the Aerosmith, all the pop music at that time. I think the only Latin thing that was popular at that era was probably Gloria Estefan, Miami Sound Machine, that style of music, which I considered to be Latin music as an American American-born Puerto Rican. I felt that was really the Latin, tinge at that time. Julio Iglesias, that was really our go-to, for Latin music at that era. But as we evolved and as we moved forward, we saw the Latin explosion. Ricky Martin, the Menudo, all that came into play. And it was different genres coming into effect. But Tito Puente was always on the straight of what his, vision was with Celia Cruz, which was bringing, mambo, guanguanco, rumba, cha-cha-cha, and, so montuno to everybody. He was the leader. He was the leader in that aspect. But his work ethic definitely was there. And Celia's was as well. Both of them. That's why they were considered the king and queen, those icons, because their work ethic and their humbleness to the world really shined. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you. When you kind of look back at your growth as a musician, were there any key moments that were crossroads for you? I mean, certainly moving from heavy metal to playing Latin jazz was a crossroads. But were there some other major crossroads that you found yourself at, and how did you handle those?
I love challenging my mind to mix different sounds, just like my father did, as he went from playing typical mambo music to playing pachangas, and then to playing the charanga music, and then to boogaloo, and then to, of course, Tito Puente was one of the first Latin percussion players to play on a hip-hop record, which was Sugar Hill Groove by Sugar Hill Gang, 1979. Wow. That he was the first pioneering Latin band leader timbalero to play on a dance freestyle record called Clave Rocks, came out in 1986. And then, of course, the whole mix of Carlos Santana and Tito Puente with Oye Como Va, Para los Rumberos. It's nice to see that Carlos Santana remade a lot of my father's classic tunes. Reinventing yourself and challenging yourself is something that Puente was doing throughout his entire career. Also, putting in the Latin jazz. He did a whole 10-year tenure with doing Latin jazz music with the Golden Men of Latin Jazz, the Golden Men Latin of All-Stars, and of course the Latin Jazz Percussion Ensemble they did with Martin Cohen, which had Mario Rivera, Dave Valentin, all these fantastic Latin jazz artists as well. But challenging myself to mix metal music and mambo music is where I'm at now. There's got to be a way to do it. I just saw a mariachi group. They're called Metal Mariachi. But I'm just trying to come up with different creative ideas in doing that. But I think there's a niche and there's a genre for every style of music, and taking the conga and the timbal and bongo and bringing it to different genres of music, it's always going to be there. You hear it in all R&B, blues music. There's always a conga in there. There's always a timbal in there. Even pop music, Hotel California has timbales in there too. The Eagles, everybody. Don Henley was playing timbales, and he always stuck it in there. And of course, influenced by Tito Puente. So every genre of music has that, and I always challenge myself to do that. Well, as I moved forward, I went from Latin house music to freestyle to dance to salsa. Now I'm playing traditional Tito Puente music, but I still have innovative ideas that I want to bring out. And a lot of reggaetoneros are calling me now lately, and I'm looking forward to maybe jamming with one of them, Daddy Yankees, the Bad Bunnies, all those new generational acts. I guess I would call them that. Now that I'm 50 years old, I call them new school guys now. But I would love to work with them and bring that traditional tropical sound to their genre. So I'm always looking for new and innovative ways to bring Tito Puente music to a new generation. So yeah.
Speaking of which, I wanted to ask you if you've heard about this live Instagram page called The Session IG Live, where this gentleman, I think his name is James Christian Hand, takes stems of musicians from Michael Jackson to George Clinton to Iron Maiden, name it. And he actually goes through and he plays the stems of the original recordings from Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, Janet Jackson. I'd say about 35,000 followers. So on any given night, he might have like 1,000 followers on an IG Live. But I was going to ask you if you have any stems of either your father's recordings or your recordings that you might want to share with him. I'll put you guys in touch. I'll send it to you on your Instagram, but it'd be really interesting to feature some of these classic recordings if you have access to them in that context. Because what I find it does, it reintroduces a whole new generation to the recording process that used to happen in the analog and strictly analog days, and the way you had to be ready to throw down in 1 or 2 takes and get that sound and get that arrangement. That's a lost art in some sense. So I wanted to mention that, and that came up for me as you're talking about, que sigue la tradición con la rumba y todo eso,
Yeah, I love that, and definitely connect with that IG feed.
Yeah.
That sounds like something I would be very much interested in. Again, absolutely right. It would reintroduce that to a new generation of people. I don't have too many master recordings of Tito Puente. I have reel to reels like what you got, so I have to get the machine and all that to get all that stuff. But most of the recordings, of course, reside with Sony Music, Universal, and I think the RCA Victor, BMG. I think BMG owns Sony now, so so it's Sony usually has all that stuff. But those masters are going to be reverted back to the estate of Tito Puente, in which I would love to do something like that, to take those, and I'm going to remaster a lot of those classic, old classic things. You said something about the takes, doing the takes really quick. They called my father 1TT. So what does that mean? One take Tito.
Tito, right.
And he would go in. He said, make sure the timbales are set up. He would go in, just nail out one solo, and that would fit. My dad was a master percussionist like that. And I'm like, wow, he did it in one take. And it was just amazing to watch. Really cool.
Wow. It's amazing. Totally amazing.
That's awesome. They say that about Frank Sinatra as well, that Frank Sinatra was a one take guy. You had to be ready.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
you were talking about something that I also thought was really interesting as well, and that is, within the music history, there's different artists have handled the ownership and being able to keep the copyrights of their music in different ways. I mean, there's been some fantastic examples. For example, like Ray Charles really, in a way, pioneered keeping the ownership of his masters, or at least some ownership, at least a percentage of ownership, and partnering with the different labels so that they were partners. It wasn't just the record companies owning everything. Frank Sinatra was another pioneer in the music industry in that way. And you had mentioned your father, sharing with you about the different nuances of the music business. How did your father, throughout the Fontana All-Stars onward, handle these different issues with rights and being able to control his music? And he did so many albums, like you said. Was there a kind of learning curve for him in the business? And was he able to empower you as well to carry on a tradition of ownership and freedom?
Back then, just like every other artist, and we hear it all the time, that, they were all swindled and duped, and they were all shylarks, and, nobody got their royalties and all that. And that did happen. And I think every single artist across the board, from the beginning of sound recording, we can go back to when the airwaves started. You can go back to all the way back to them. Everybody's been ripped off, and it's just like the norm for most artists. They didn't understand it. Most artists are artists. That's what they are. They want to share their artwork, and they're too busy trying to create more art and to entertain people than to think about, well, where are my royalties going, and where the master recordings or anything like that. My father did 2 to 3 albums a year. That's why he has over 186. So when he was recording with RCA Victor, he was doing 2 to 3 a year. So the way it worked was that he would record, they would give him a check, he would record the album, they put it out. He was too busy touring and on to the next album to think about that last one. But of course they would be selling. And so that's why I would say my father really didn't stay on top of it too much, as far as where his royalties and things of that nature are going. However, as he got older, and of course, his trusty old son and our family, we told them, as laws change and the companies change too, the conglomerates and everybody's getting bought out, you have to follow where your music is going. And we did that. We did that about 20 years ago before his passing. And that's why my father ended up being one of those artists that got his residuals and collects his residuals on time and orderly fashion. And we monitor all that. And, things have changed. Now it's all streaming services now and doing it. We stay on top of that as well. But Tito Puente was just a magical person as far as his performing live. My dad did so many performances live. 300 shows a year is a lot of work. And that's going for like 20 years straight. And prior to that, it was a lot of recording. But it's very important that we follow the master tapes and all that. And I know that we're going to get all ours back from yesteryear, from the 1950s and 60s. Those are the master recordings that us as the family would like to get retracted back to us. And we're looking for that. All the rest of them, a lot of people still have them. And those are really fond recordings. You mentioned one earlier, Numero 100 was a fantastic album. I did a recording on my new album of two of those songs. One was being Déjame Soñar. The other one was a tune by the great Ismael Miranda, who right now is very, very sick in Puerto Rico. Well, we wish him well recovery. But I got Yolanda Duca to do a tune called El Bribón del Aguacero. Fantastic tune. Those songs, I always make sure that the writers and the composers of those tunes get their credit, because my father didn't get a lot of credit when he was going through it. So I want to make sure that in the future, those recording artists get their due respect and their due royalties. Tito Puente was slick, though. My father recorded a lot of tunes for a guy named Morris Levy. He owned a catalog. It was a the name of it, Chesky Records, or some other. There was another record company back in the day, but so he wasn't getting a lot of royalties. So what he would do is he would re-record the songs and with another company and change the title, and that way you got the royalties for that song.
Right.
So my father was slick. He did that a lot. So if you listen to a lot of Tito Puente records, you'd be like, hey, that song sounds familiar. Like, that song was Hong Kong Mambo in 1957, but in this one it's called Hong Kong Watusi. He changed the name of the title, but it was still the same song. And that's how Puente got around that whole, these guys are trying to rip him off. He said, okay, Mr. Smarty Pants, I'm going to do the song over and put it on another album. And that's what he would do.
I wanted to bring up some of the history in the legend of Oye Como Va. Have you heard that was originally Chanchullo by Cachao, and that was recorded by Tito Sr. and later recorded by Santana? But it's sort of a legend within the industry. Those guys know. But was that information something that ever came across your pool of information?
Yes. Okay. So the story is this, from what I understand. Remember, I wasn't born then, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Back in the 1940s and 50s, all the Latin musicians that came from Cuba and came from the Dominican Republic and all that, they all went to New York, and they all started working together, bouncing ideas off each other. They all influenced each other. Today, they call it copyright infringement.
Right.
But back then, there wasn't those words, and that thing didn't exist. There wasn't even the word copyright at that time.
Right.
So they all kind of bounced off each other with different ideas. Israel Cachao Lopez, the great Cachao, el gran Cachao, born an amazing bajita and one of the founders of the mambo sound and the word mambo, as a matter of fact, him and Arsenio Rodriguez. They did a tune called Chanchulo, that's correct. And that was written and composed, I believe, in the 50s. Now, that tune has a vamp line, but the lyric, of course, didn't have the lyric of Oye Como Va. So the lyric, father wrote the lyric of Oye Como Va, but the influence is there. And Cachao worked with Tito Puente directly in many recordings as well. As a matter of fact, my father recorded Chanchulo on an album in 1956 for R.C. Victor with Cachao on bass.
Wow.
And so they were working together in the studio, and I guess they got the ideas together. But my father did use that cha-cha-cha vamp line when he had the influence of Cachao when he recorded Oye Como Va, which was recorded in 1963. The Riverside Ballroom, December. And it was a very fluke. It was a fluke. One of those, when you're recording an album, you record the songs that you're recording, but he had that tune kind of on the side. And it was one of those, fillers. There's the word. It was a filler. So he recorded it, but of course that version was influential to Carlos Santana. Then in 1971, he recorded it on Abraxas, which became a worldwide phenomenal hit. That tune, and of course, Para los Rumberos on the following album. Santana was very much influenced by Tito Puente, but the tune does have the influence of Cachao's Chanchulo. So yes, the influence is there, but the lyrical content, my father did write Oye Como Va Mulata, all the lyrics. So he was the writer of Oye Como Va. But the tune itself, definitely much influenced by Cachao and Afro-Cuban music for that matter. because
Yes.
Afro-Cuban music is really what Tito Puente played. A lot of people
Yes.
say he's one of the only Puerto Ricans that did more for Afro-Cuban music than any other Puerto Rican. And Puente was
Absolutely.
one of those because he worked with so many
Totally.
Afro-Cuban musicians and loved the island. And still to this day, I do too, adore the Cuban sound
Yes.
of Afro-Cuban music from Cuba.
Absolutely. Thank you for filling us in of that whole,
Yeah.
lineage.
I get that. I get that question a lot about how how it was invented. But yeah, Dad and Cachao were very, very good friends. They did bounce ideas off each other, and it was influenced by the Gran Cachao. Yes, it was.
And it's amazing that you speak of the humility. I mean, I got the opportunity to record about 5 albums with Cachao when he was alive, and the humility of these artists, as you mentioned about your father, is absolutely amazing. When Cachao was asked about the influence of his music and Oye Como Va and all that, he would just simply say, it's an honor, and I'm glad that the next generation is following the tradition and that they consider me part of that tradition. I mean, that goes all the way back to many compositions that Cuba had influenced. And I mean, the legacy of Cuban music and Puerto Rican music is one pie. As my father would say, the same people, different beans.
That's right.
I mean, it's a legacy that is so massive at this point, and the whole Fania era and how your father was part of that and his own legacy is just, it's massive, man. When I think about the days of Fania All-Stars and how they were, like you said, filling up stadiums back then. I mean, those guys were rock stars, man. They took the music to a whole nother level, and because of their passion and their love for it, like you said in the beginning of this interview, they went into a whole nother stratosphere with it,
They did. Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Magical,
man.
I think this is a question actually both of you could answer, because I know that both of you have been exposed to a lot of great falsettos and great masters. And Tito, through the conversation, you've been mentioning a few of them, but is there someone that you would like to share about in terms of, I mean, certainly your father was a tremendous influence, but were there other falsettos and other musicians and masters that you worked with that also influenced you as an artist?
There's so many great artists that I look up to, but notwithstanding that, I also were around them all my life. So every one of them worked with my father, especially the ones that are on my latest album, The King and I. I look up to each and every one of those artists as an uncle or an aunt, or just somebody that I really desired to be like, or to just explore their vision and what they see in their performances. But again, I always go with the rock music. So, I always when I looked in the mirror when I was a kid, I was thinking about Bon Jovi. I was thinking about, about Aerosmith, about Steven Tyler and being a rock star. But I never thought that I would be playing Tito Puente music at the age of 50. But I have so many great influences in my life and in my career, but they're just not the genre of music that I play. Dance music, freestyle, I love all that music. I love heavy metal and rock, and I have so many different influences, music and icons that I adore and I look up to. The Tony Bennett's, the Duke Ellingtons, the Count Basies, those great icons like that are just magical, and they're just monstrous as far as in their respective genres. But to me, I don't feel that Puente music or anything that I'm doing now can resonate more, but just with the fans. And I see that when I have actors and actresses and people, inboxing me, and, Charlie Sheen, hey man, I'm a fan of Tito Puente. Okay. Just celebrities, and, it's just funny, Fat Joe and rappers. Hey man, Tito, what's up? They all inbox me and they all give me kudos and respect, for what I'm doing and promoting Tito Puente music. But it's funny seeing that and hearing how Tito Puente's, name is so synonymous with just being an American Latin iconic musician. Absolutely. And it's great to see that people are still respecting that. And, I love that, just that in general.
That's beautiful.
Tito, is there one performance that stands out maybe above other performances that you have up until this point a specific memory about that really stands out for you?
I have so many great memories of the performances that I've done. And then, of course, the ones that I joined my father when he was alive. Those were really special to me, especially the ones in they call them La Plaza de los Toros, which is like coliseums where they have they're bull arenas where they did Ole and all the bull arenas in Spain and in Colombia and South America. Those stadiums would fill up with thousands of people. And those were really the special ones for me, being with my father, seeing how many people loved and adored him and chanting his name, Tito, Tito, you know. So those were really special to me. In my career, sharing the stage with him up in Toronto, Canada, and a big Coliseum over there as well with La India. I've done so many great concerts. I did 100,000 people in Mexico a couple of years ago in Veracruz. It was a big festival with Victor Manuel, Mark Anthony. All of us joined together to do a festival and a tribute to Tito Puente as well. But you know what? To me, the best performances are the ones where the people are dancing. And where I'm performing either in a festival or a nightclub or something, and the people are really dancing salsa and mambo music the way traditionally Tito Puente music was supposed to be heard, like the Palladium in New York, where people are dancing together, doing rumbas and cha-cha-chas and guaguancos. They're not paying attention to me. They're paying attention to the music. And those are my favorite type of concerts, when people are dancing in front of me. And then in between songs, they're taking a break. I don't have to say anything. All right, you guys ready for the next one? Here we go. Whereas in performing arts centers, I love performing it, but I got to play different types of songs where people can engage with them. Clapping your hands and sitting down is in my bag. I want you to get up and dance, you know? So those are really my favorite concerts, the ones where people are dancing mambo right in front of the orchestra.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Oh, man, brother.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's beautiful. You reminded me when I was in Puerto Rico working on a TV series. Actually, you may know her, Carol Maldonado. She was married to Renee back in the day, and from Menudo. And she took me to like a little bar in Guaynabo. And it was this little tiny place. I mean, you wouldn't have known anything other than you could hear the music from outside. But you walked in, and they had by day it was a restaurant, but at night they'd clear all the tables and clear all the chairs, and everybody would be like along the walls of the restaurant in chairs, and all the musicians were playing in these chairs, and the dancers were in the middle dancing. Everybody, like, you would have thought like the whole thing was choreographed, but it was all like in the moment, in the music and the clara and the rhythm and the sweat and everything, man. It was just so, so beautiful. So you reminded me of that moment in Puerto Rico with Carol Maldonado, which was great. We were we were engaged, and Menudo comes to town, and so we go to a concert together. So it was weird, but it was cool, man. Good times, man. I'll probably cut that part out of the interview.
You had too much of a good time in Puerto Rico.
Just the part about Carol and Menudo.
Cut that out.
Because I ended up because I really didn't know. Like, all of a sudden, like, I'm down there, I'm working on the film. The film actually goes, all of a sudden, like, I'm at the market, and like, I'm on the front cover of one of the gossip magazines there. Because Menudo in Puerto Rico back then was like,
They were the kings.
It was funny. Yeah, it was funny, man. I had no
Original
idea.
boy band, man.
Yeah. I mean, I remember as a kid, Menudo, when I was living in New York and in Hoboken, and like everybody loved them,
Yeah. Here's a funny story. This is the first time I ever found out that my father was famous. Okay. So I must have been maybe about 9 years old. Menudo, this is pre-Ricky Martin. So this is Robbie, Rosa, Ray, Johnny, Charlie. I remember their names because my sister had the freaking posters all over her wall. So she must have been 10 or 11. This is the first time we really understood who Tito Puente was. And my father took us to a Menudo concert at Madison Square Garden. We were in the front row. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I was like, that's pretty popular. This guy must be popular. I didn't understand what my father, who he was or what he was really doing. So we went to the concert, and Menudo stopped the concert right in the middle of the show, and they put a spotlight in Madison Square Garden, about 28, the face fits about, 26,000 screaming girls It's all screaming girls. And the spotlight goes on Tito Puente right there. And we're standing next to our dad. And they were like, con ustedes, aquí estamos Tito Puente. The entire place went crazy. They were chanting his name, Tito, Tito, Tito. That was the moment where I realized how popular Tito Puente was and how famous my father was. I didn't realize it from before because I didn't go on tour with him or go on the road with him. But him taking us to a Menudo concert, the fan frenzy was incredible. The people went crazy. That was the end of the Menudo concert because nobody paid attention to them anymore. They were looking at Tito Puente. And it was really, really something to see. And that was the moment right there in my childhood that I remember the most, how famous Tito Puente was at a Menudo concert.
Wow.
There it is.
Wow, there it is. How old were you?
I must have been about 8, 9 years old. So let's say, no, it might be a little bit older. So it must have been 1983. So that's when they were out, right? 83, 84 Menudo?
Yeah.
I believe so. They were doing the what was that? I forgot all their songs. They were doing all the dancing, like a cannonball and all. Mi moto.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to be a Menudo for a minute. Everybody wanted to be a Menudo.
Well, back then, man, the East Coast, man, all the girls love Menudo. So
crazy for them. Crazy.
Definitely, that is good. That was fun times, man. How are you doing for time?
I got a little bit more. I got about another 25 minutes or so. But 3 o'clock, then I gotta round up the children. It's summertime.
Yeah.
Nice. So you mentioned children. I'm a new father, and I just balancing. Just had a directing job, and so all of a sudden I was thrown into this project for 2 weeks, and I mean, just working every day, 15-hour days. And then finally we had the shoot, and it was literally that day I worked 23 hours. I've had the experience of your father, and you mentioned at 8 years old, really become aware of his popularity and his work ethic. How has that affected you as a father and parenting?
It's an amazing feeling being a parent. It did change me. I do everything now for my children. I try to incorporate them. Now that they're older, though, my kids aren't really kids anymore. They're more teenagers. So now I incorporate them into my daily schedule, which is, taking them on the road with me, which I love to do now. I want them to spend more time with me and experience what I did when I was their age. My son's 13, my daughter's 14. So that was really the age when I started traveling with my father and experiencing and understanding, the magnitude of what he did and understanding our culture. And that's why I became cultured and understanding that my Hispanic heritage and how I became orgulloso. I became proud of who I was by traveling with him and understanding that. And I want my kids to do that as well. When teenagers, they get into that little identity thing, they want to understand a little bit more about their culture and who they are. And I want to teach them, that they are American and Puerto Rican and Latino and really embrace that. But as babies, it was funny because when I was a child going to my father's concert, I fall asleep backstage. So that's what I did, and I'm sure your child will probably do the same thing. If you ever take them to your job or your work, they're just going to be bored. Oh, that's dad doing his thing. And they really don't have no interest in what you're doing anyway. But it's great that I can instill that in my kids. And I took a lot from what my dad taught me when he said to listen and look. And I try to do that with my kids whenever they come with me to an interview or to a concert or anything like that. And, they get bored very easily. But I tried my best to entertain them by just teaching them a little bit about the percussion and teaching them about what their grandfather instilled in me. This music resonates with all generations of people. So when they go to my shows, they see kids there, they understand, wow, it's for kids too. So it gives them more of an incentive to go and spend time with their dear old dad, I guess. So, but it's great. It's great. And I understand where you're coming from. Having a child is a handful. And I got 2 of them. And yeah, it's a handful.
Yeah. One of the focuses of CHAR is an idea that's basically I've noticed we don't always have the best examples of Latinos in the media. So part of the idea of our show CHAR is to talk to leaders in the Latino community. And you're definitely a leader in our community. And I wanted to talk to you about leadership and, like you mentioned about, in putting an album together, I mean, that's taking on a leadership position, and the organizing, the bringing people together, from a leadership point of view, like what's that been like for you? And how do you see your role as a leader within the community and within your band and within your business?
So I know my impact, and I know where my voice is being heard, and I know I'm being seen in my social media pages. And so I know take pride in everything that I post or anything that I'm going to say. And I think that comes from my father too, because everything that he did and he said, he meant, and he did it with pride. And I think that's really important being in this world today. Music is bringing people together. I take pride in being Hispanic. I take pride in being Puerto Rican, Puerto Riqueño. I take pride in the music that I present. I think it's multicultural music, and what we bring to the table as Latinos, as just men of being Hispanic, of race, of origin. I think it's important that we aren't seen as these brutos, as these machismo guys, as these, these Neanderthalic thought figures of people. We get that stigmatism a lot. And I think we have very eloquent, intelligent way of speaking. I think we can connect with people around the world. I connect with all ages, creeds, colors, people of all races, Jamaican, Haitian, French, Italian, Japanese, Chinese, every culture, race comes to my concerts, and I connect with them. So every thought that I might have, and I know that I'm present, it's well thought out, it's thought provoking, and I make sure that I'm going to say something that's going to be influential to the young youth of today. For instance, here's a perfect example. Our Cuban brothers and sisters on the island over there, it's time for change. I believe that there is too. I say that with pride and conviction and passion. It's time for change. The old is old, guys. We're getting older. We're not getting younger. Mm-hmm. And the old has to be pushed out. It's time for new legislation, new faces, new thought processes, new everything. Yes. And I think Cuba is way overdue for a new government there. I think they need new guidelines for how the people should be treated. And I think it's time for music to be a part of that culture, since they have given us everything that we have as far as music is concerned. Afro-Cuban music is what salsa is. And it's time now for us as just Latinos and Latin musicians to give back to that beautiful country. And I want to go there and perform and do a bunch of concerts for free and make sure that these people know that we respect their culture and everything that they've given us. So those things are the things that I think about as, and like you said before, what CHAR means. I think as a leader, I feel that those things are thought-provoking, and I want everybody to understand that being a leader in my community, or what I do in Latin musicianship, that we have a responsibility. And I've reached out, they've reached out to me too. Emilio Tefan, Gloria, everybody in the Cuban community, they all reached out to me, and I support them 1000%. I'm probably the only Puerto Rican that really pushes Afro-Cuban music around the world with timbal playing. There are other Latin musicians out there, but I'm a band leader that really pushes it out there and makes sure that everybody knows that this music is not salsa, it's Afro-Cuban music. And I'm glad that I can be a part of that community too. Notwithstanding too, I live in South Florida, so I'm an honorary Cuban as well. But it's important for me that
man.
For me, it's important that my voice is heard, and we have a responsibility, all three of us. We got a responsibility to our Latin brothers and sisters to show them that we are intelligent, thought-provoking, and not these, people that are on the sidelines. We have voices. And these kids today, I'm telling you, Nelson, Rami, these kids today, they are our future. They are the ones watching the TikToks, the Instagrams. They're doing it all. They are our future. And every follower and everybody, I respect that. I respect that they're going to be the pioneers of the new generation of this music and what we do, just as Latinos and our heritage. Got to teach them. I always tell kids, teach your kids about where this Latin music comes from. Teach them about Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, Johnny Pacheco, Fania All-Stars. Teach them about where this music and the roots, the raíces of this sound comes from. It comes from the Dominican Republic, from the island of Cuba, from Puerto Rico, from Mexico, from Colombia, from South America. from Central America. It comes from our Latin brothers and sisters around the world. So I like to keep that narrative. That's the real important narrative for me when I'm doing any posting or anything that has to do with culture. And Char, you guys are important to that. You're giving a platform for someone like me to tell everybody about these important issues that we have as Latino men, around the world. So thanks.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that, brother. Beautifully said, and I agree with you 1,000%.
Gracias, hermano.
Seguro que sí.
Yeah. That was beautiful, Tito. Thank you for that. It's so gorgeous. So we're really bringing together, Latino leaders from all walks of life. And if there's anybody that you would like us to talk to, or you think would be great for us to talk to, we'll definitely do that. And then hopefully, as my agent wanted us to do 10 shows and then take it out. And so maybe the next time we'll be able to fly you in and meet you at a studio or come to one of your concerts.
Sure.
Speaking of which, what's your schedule like looking in the future?
Wow, got a lot of things happening. I'm so grateful, that again, nothing got canceled from last year during the pandemic. Everything was postponed, but I got some fantastic concerts coming up. We're planning on doing, hopefully, a tour with all the artists that are on the album, The King and I. Be hitting the major markets, of course, California being one of them, Los Angeles, New York, and Miami, maybe even Chicago as well, and Texas. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'll be on the West Coast soon. I'll be doing a whole West Coast tour, as a matter of fact, in October. We're just trying to complete it right now. Be in Los Angeles, doing San Diego and Oakland, California, out there at Yoshi's. So I'm looking forward to hitting the West Coast. It has been over a year since we've been there. And I know that everybody wants to come out and dance, and see some live Latin jazz and Latin music. So I'll look out for you guys. You guys, of course, are VIP all the time. Anytime you guys want to come to the show, just hit me up. And I would love to have you guys as my guests. And, I'll throw you guys on my Nelson, para tocar la campana, and you can play the maraca. You guys could jump in the band. I love jamming with everybody, so you guys could jump on stage with me and jam with me. But got some great concerts coming up. You know what? The best way to do it is follow me on my social media pages, because I'm always posting flyers and stuff. So you can follow me on Facebook.com/Tito Puente Jr. I got a fan page there. Got 135,000 hardcore Mambo fans. So I'm always keeping that thing updated daily. Of course, the Instagram, @Tito Puente Jr. Follow me on Twitter. And my kids are getting me into TikTok right now. So I'm kind of learning that a little bit.
Awesome.
But, on my social media pages, I'm kind of pushing that. I'm also doing a hot sauce. I got a little hot sauce. It's a Tito Puente hot sauce. So, yeah, kind of cool. Tito Puente Jr. hot sauce. I got different flavors. Mambo Diablo, Rancancan, Oye Como Va sauce. It's really cool. It's got different sweet flavors. That'll be coming out. I got some T-shirts. This is one of them. I got some T-shirts.
That's a nice one, man.
On them. So I'm kind of excited about getting these out to the fans. So the CD, LP, hot sauces, or bundle packs, a lot of great things are going to be happening next coming weeks. And I will be posting up all of that on my social media pages. And again, just really, really cool that I can get this platform to promote these things and talk about them. And a lot of great concerts. I hope to see everybody in concert real soon, man. I love to jam with you guys and see you guys. Just give you guys a big high five and a hug. It's been a long time, being around people, but I'm vaccinated. I'm ready to get out there and entertain the people with the music of my late father, Tito Puente.
Beautiful, man. That's awesome. Thank you. One question I wanted to, is there anything that you would recommend to a beginning musician?
Yes, I get that question a lot too. The SoundCloud platform works fantastic. I'm hearing a lot of great salsa singers and performers on there. The YouTube, of course, I'm seeing a lot of great performers from around the world performing on these things. Again, surround yourself with creative people, thus you will be creative. I always take that into mind with what my father taught me. And being around musicians, and Nelson, you can vouch for this. Being around musicians is a camaraderie. Me and Nelson could probably sit all night long just sitting talking about music. It's just something about musicianship, and that we just have a camaraderie. I can sit with a piano player, a sax player, and just talk about music all night long. I love doing that. Yeah. And to me, that's my favorite part about being a musician and being around musicians. So if you are an upcoming musician, take your crap and surround yourself with other creative people and other creative musicians. I promise you, you're going to bounce ideas off each other, just like Cachao and Tito Puente did. And look at that. They made a grand hit.
Ooh,
So
chills,
it's
man,
so,
chills.
yeah, man, it's so cool to be around musicians, and I'm glad that now we can get out there. Trust me, I it's funny because in 2019 when I was touring a lot, I didn't want to be around my musicians. I was done with them. I was like, okay, after the show, I didn't want to see them. Now we go to the hotel and that. Now, after the show, we're like high five, we're chatting, we're talking all night now, and it's great, you know. And the
That's
camaraderie of being around other creative people is what my advice to any young musician that's watching right now, whether you play saxophone, woodwind, percussion, a violin, string instrument, anything. Surround yourself with other people that play that same instrument. You're going to get ideas off each other. You guys are going to have. That's how I created a band. That's how you create all orchestras. Hanging around other musicians. So do yourself a favor and surround yourself with other creative people like yourself.
Yes, indeed.
All right, awesome, Tito. Thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful interview, and thank you for your generosity and just the beautiful sharing that we shared today. So thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch and look forward to seeing you in person and in concert. And we'll also be sharing your links with our audience. And thank you so much. And anytime you have anything to share with us.
Thank you so much, Rami and Nelson, man. Good to see you, my brother. I hope to get out to the West Coast and hang out with you guys. And again, it's such a pleasure. If you guys are interested in the docu-series, you could check out this website. It's called TitoPuenteProject.com. And really, hopefully, that all the fans will enjoy that, the docu-series on the life and legacy of Tito Puente. And, of course, follow me on all my social media. And you guys can pick up the brand new record called The King and I, out on all digital platforms now. So look out for that. And thank you. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes. Es un honor para mí. Yo soy el hijo del rey de timbal, Tito Puente, de participar en su programa. Thank you guys once again, man. Nice to see y'all.
Appreciate you,
Thank you for
Tito.
your
Thank
openness,
you for
your honesty, and your hustle. I consider you an excellent ambassador for Música Latina around the world. So it was great meeting you, great talking with you, and I look forward to doing it again at another time in person.
Please, Nelson, stay in touch, man, and inbox me those things on IG. I love to be a part of that.
Absolutely,
Thanks,
I will.
All right.
Gracias, hermanos.
Thank you so much, Tito. Appreciate you.
Have a fantastic weekend, and do it with Tito Puente music. Vaya.
Vaya. Vale.
Take care. Thank you so much. All right.